Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Jeff Cranford, Ole here. Today we're going to talk about advocacy. We're going to talk about Jesus as being our advocate. Jeff, the whole notion of advocacy and having someone speaking on your behalf, when you were out there on the tour, trying to make a living at it and competing, did you have any supporters, any advocates for you?
Well, I mean, the first thing you think of is sponsors, and obviously they were advocates because I didn't oftentimes make the money back that they invested. That's why I'm sitting here today. But I will tell you that I think back, as I think about advocacy, if you think of advocacy as being something, somebody's doing something for you that you couldn't do for yourself, well, that was certainly sponsors exemptions. And I had a number of sponsors exemptions. I alluded to it, I think, earlier. So when I played in the BMW about 5 years in a row, there was nothing in my playing pedigree that would have justified me getting a sponsors exemption. The other guys that were getting sponsors exemptions were guys like John Daly, Fred Couples, Paul Azinger, guys from the U.S. Tour, and actually they'd be maybe even paid a fee at that time. But I happen to know a guy in a high place that was an advocate who was, at that time, Dr. Wolfgang Reitzle was the head of BMW, and he would have me come over and get me a sponsor's exemption, and they treated me just like anybody else got treated. And so he was certainly, I would call that advocacy, for sure. But I think, Ole, as I think about it, I think about advocacy. You know it as well as anybody. I mean, you were an advocate, obviously, for your clients for 42 years and taught advocacy for 10 years. Talk to me a little bit about what that entails and about the ins and outs.
The interesting thing, we always called it advocacy, and I really didn't know. I just know I did it. I never looked it up in the dictionary. But for a long period of time in Europe, in the court system, there were a number of jurisdictions where they called the people who spoke advocates. We call them lawyers or attorneys in the U.S., but that's where it comes out of. It's someone who could speak for, speak on behalf of. My job as an advocate would be to investigate, to marshal and gather facts, then analyze those facts to figure out what the best case was, how best to argue it, and then go out and probably do what I teach, which is called advocacy, which is teaching people how to make arguments, how to be persuasive, how to convince juries, how to convince judges to do something, or in some cases convince a mediator or an arbitrator to do something. That's what advocacy is.
It's making a case, right?
It is. We talked earlier about my client Jeff Borden in Alabama. He couldn't do it. His IQ was like 75, and so in our legal system we have the ability to have someone go into court and speak on someone else's behalf, to be an intermediary. And I think another term that shows up in the dictionary is intercessor. So the advocate is someone who speaks on someone else's behalf or because they can't do it themselves. That's what an advocate, what I saw my job over my career was.
Well, Jesus certainly then becomes the advocate. Now, obviously, the Holy Spirit as well is our advocate. I think immediately, there are many places that I can go, both in way forerunning Jesus. So I think we alluded to it once before, but Isaiah 59:16 again, God looks for somebody to intercede, found no one, and so he sent his own right arm, a foreshadowing of his substance, his very person, his right arm, which would become Jesus. And then, boy, we get over, and Paul is speaking to the believing Jewish community in Hebrews chapter 7. It's fascinating. It says, hence also he is able to save forever, about Jesus, those who draw near to God through him, since he lives to make intercession for us. He prays for us. It fascinates me, Ole. I think about people all the time that Jesus, and I'm not the whole Jesus thing. I'm like, look, if you understand a holy and righteous God, you understand that you can't even come into his presence. The Bible, Exodus 33 said, nobody can even see the face of God and live. We don't understand who we're dealing with. And then Jesus comes along and says, I will be your intermediary. I will die for you, and then I will make it right. I always think of it in terms of like a backstage pass to a concert or something. I'd want somebody to go in. I don't just show up at the backstage and go and not have one of those special, special badges. But boy, if the lead guy in the band or something comes over and goes, he's with me. He becomes my advocate. He's here because of something I couldn't possibly do for myself. It's a lot like Jesus, isn't it? I mean, it really is like Jesus.
Well, it is. I mean, I need someone to speak for me. I need someone because I can't do it myself. And Jesus is the person, in the legal sense, who's doing it for me. Well, I can talk to Jesus and I can talk to God in my prayers, and however, I still need someone out there acting on my behalf. I mean, how do you see Jesus as your advocate?
Well, I would just sum it up to say this. In John chapter 14 and John 16, Jesus is giving us a picture of sending the Holy Spirit. And he says, I'm going to send the advocate. I'm going to send the advocate. It's better that I go away. Why? Well, Jesus in a physical body just couldn't be with everybody at the same time. Now we have the opportunity to have the advocate, the Holy Spirit. And you see this synonymous in the book of Acts. The Spirit of Jesus and the Holy Spirit are used synonymously at times. So he gives us his advocate. He is our advocate. And then he gives us the Holy Spirit, who's constantly, going back and forth. He's revealing the Spirit of God to us, his plans for us. He then convicts us of sin and righteousness and judgment. It's actually a beautiful, intimate picture of us and our relationship with God. So that's an exciting thing.
Well, I was going to say, wow, I mean, that's the ultimate advocate. I wish that I could have had that person teaching advocacy in my stead.
Yeah, exactly.
But very helpful in terms of understanding that notion, Jeff. That's it for this session, folks. Please join us for the final session that we're going to cover, where we're going to talk about Jesus as judge. Jesus and God as judge. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.